here. Now, Stanislav, again, you as an expert, I may have asked you this in the past, but maybe it bears repeating. But I think I actually asked this to a different guest recently. So, why you mentioned earlier in this interview that the pace of the war is increasing, but people keep saying that something's wrong with the Russian military because it's so slow. But then other people say that if you gather more than 10 men in one spot in this modern warfare, they're dead. So what is it? Why is the speed of the war so seemingly slow from public perception?
Well, at present, the speed of the war isn't nearly as slow as it was. Again, if you're talking about on average on a 30-kilometer front, and there's about 5 of these active fronts right now, 6, 5, 6. You're moving on average between 500 meters to 1,500 meters a day. Yeah. So you're talking about every day you're looking at between 30 and 50 square kilometers of territory being freed from Nazi yoke. I mean, again, 80,000 Ukrainians paid for 120 square kilometers. Gotcha. They're now losing on average between 20, 30, to 40, and some extremes go up to 50 square kilometers a day. So no, things have started moving, and part of that is ammunition shortage, which doesn't mean they're totally out of ammunition. Just what little ammunition they have to spare it only for critical use. Part of it is also because the more experienced units have been I won't say decimated, because people always use that term. It's been decimated without ever understanding what decimated means.
Well, yeah, decimated means Roman times and all that stuff, and the punishments.
10%. Every 10th person, every 10th legionnaire was put to death when a unit ran.
Yeah.
So no, they're not decimated. They're annihilated.
Yeah.
They're not just combat ineffective. They're which in the U.S. Army or NATO, combat ineffective is below 75% strength.
Oh.
They're not combat effective. They're combat destroyed.
Yeah.
So at this point, you get a lot of units that really have not a lot of people. And when you start dumping raw meat into them right off the street, that raw meat doesn't live very long. It gets turned into burger real quick. So the further you go at this point, the higher the casualties and the higher rate of death amongst your forces, because the most of the new recruits don't live long enough to get any combat experience that will allow them to survive. They usually get whacked pretty damn quickly. While the other side, in this case our side, that's not losing anything near as much, as gigantic reserves that are already trained, is starting to speed up as a steamroll. Which brings us to the next point that, to put it mildly, NATO is shitting itself.
Well, why?
And no amount of diapers is going to save NATO from a very smelly mess. So now you
like an embarrassment factor, or are they scared because Russia is outgunning them in a fight?
Well, Russia is obviously outgunning them. So the next question is, what do we do? The pseudo proxy war, and when I say pseudo, it's because there are hundreds. If actually there are not hundreds, there are well over 20,000 NATO soldiers fighting in Ukraine. There's been over 3,000 dead Poles. Yeah, officially they all quit the Polish army. Over 10,000 Polish soldiers quit the Polish army and somehow became all mercenaries. It's a whole battalion of mercenaries that served together, worked together, and brought all their equipment too. Amazing how these mercs get to leave like that. In Finland, they just had 2,000 volunteers quit the Finnish army to go fight in Ukraine, and hopefully most of them become fertilizer in Ukraine. Those HIMARS destroyed, those are dead Americans, because America is fighting directly with Russia. I mean, there's no two qualms about this. You have Americans building HIMARS. You have American logistics bringing HIMARS to Ukraine. You have Americans loading HIMARS missiles into the HIMARS platform. Yeah, the operators of those HIMARS platforms are Americans. Americans are shooting those.
Because it's impossible to train a HIMARS operator in a short period of time. Is that why?
Well, short, it's relative. Oh, and to finish the job, it's American satellite systems that are bringing those missiles onto targets. From start to finish, America is killing Russian soldiers and Russian civilians. I mean, there's no parsing. America is at war with Russia. It's already there. It's been that way for a year. Just because Russia isn't heading into NATO doesn't mean NATO isn't dying in Ukraine, because NATO's come to kill Russians in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how else to parse it. All the people with their heads up their arses, collectively, the vast majority of the American and Western population, don't seem to want to face reality. You're already at war. War is there. It hasn't been declared, but war is there.
Yeah.
And it's just one small step away from your boy is going to go off and get turned into meat on the Ukrainian front.
Well, because America, Stanislav, we've been hearing sort of comments like that kind of coming from European leaders, and boy, does that make me nervous. Not so much for the fact that things could get maybe escalated, but the whole nuclear war thing. That's what really scares me.
I'm not worried about nuclear war. I'll go over that why in a minute. Nuclear war, I'm not worried about. Okay. That's the least of concerns and possibilities, I think, at this point. But while we're going at it, and then, for example, the two Patriot systems that got whacked last week, or this beginning of this week, that's about 30 Englishmen that went to see the Queen on the other side of the tail. So, by 30 English officers and men. HIMARS does take time to train. This is not something you go over in a 4-week course. Mm-hmm. The problem is nobody trusts the Ukrainians. Let's just begin with that. Because those HIMARS will all of a sudden appear in the gray zone, and a large amount of money will change hands. The same thing they've done. Nobody trusts the Ukrainians. And same thing. Well, with the Patriots, a whole different issue. Patriots is actually a very complex system. A fire officer in a Patriot battery takes up to 20 weeks of training. That's if he's English fluent. Mm-hmm. A mechanic in a Patriot system, a base mechanic, takes 50 weeks of training.
50. Wow.
That's a base mechanic with zero real field experience. Oh yeah, these are serious systems. Anti-aircraft systems are extremely serious systems. That's why when they were saying, a bunch of farmers and coal miners shot down that Malaysian Boeing. No, they didn't.
No.
It takes, on those book systems, it takes up to 6 months of training at a facility to prepare an officer who can conduct and control that system, because it's the launchers, it's the radar, it's the control system. You're not going to get a bunch of farmers reading a manual going, hey, okay, we're ready. It's been a week. No, it just isn't going to happen. No matter how much the CNN or MSNBC wants to jump up and down and scream that. Just like Russia didn't change the American election. Just isn't going to happen. One isn't going to happen. The other isn't going to happen. It's just not a reality. Mm-hmm. Now we've got NATO instructors and other groups over there from the very first day, including CIA operatives who have been getting whacked. And Russia's basically said, and Kharkov was a clear sign, we're taking the gloves off. That's it. Enough is enough. And in Kharkov...
In what way? In what way did they take the gloves off in Kharkov? Could you explain?
Yeah, in Kharkov there was a hotel that was used by French mercs. Well, there were volunteer civilian assistants. Mm-hmm. There were French foreign legion soldiers and officers that were now, quote, mercs or volunteers or whatever the hell the French were called. There were 60 casualties dead from an Iskander strike directly on that hotel. Mm-hmm. Hotel leveled, a whole bunch of French went off to see Napoleon, including the son of a general. Mm-hmm. That was, and after that, the hunt for foreigners really started. So gloves are off. It's gentlemen, you want to play this game, we will play this game. Yeah. And before that, you mercs got killed. They were up on the front lines, but they weren't specifically targeted just because they were foreigners. Now it's going after. We're going to be very actively going after. There were some situations, especially early on, that a base that was serving as a school for mercs was taken out on the Ukrainian-Polish border. That was like an opportunity shot, because all these idiots switched on their cell phones to talk to their wives and kids and their audience on TikTok, and all these foreign telephone numbers, hundreds of them, popped up on the scopes in one specific base. So they attracted attention, which brought in even more attention of the Iskandar kind. So there were about 100 dead off of that hit, and a hell of a lot more wounded, and a couple thousand that decided we're leaving now. The safari on Russians isn't working out too well.
No, certainly didn't. Okay, all right. And
so now you've got the problem of what do you do? A proxy war that's lost leaves you one of only two options. You eventually, some sooner, some later, declare defeat and leave, and try to save face one way or the other, or you double down.
Yeah.
Now, for a European leader who are usually weak, so they have to act strong, which means they have to take risks that no strong leader would even bother with, irrational risks to try to act like they've got a spine and some kind of wit. The option is doubling down, because otherwise you got to explain to your people why you screwed their lives permanently, deindustrialized your country, collapsed your economy. Almost all of Europe is in deep recession. And for some countries, it's their second recession in 2 years, or much worse than the first one. And explain away why the quality of the life of the average European has gone to crap and is still circling the drain in the toilet. Yeah, that's going to be kind of hard to do. So let's double down. That's usually the obvious way. Plus doubling down, which would mean actual direct kinetic war between NATO units and Russian units. So by units, we're talking about actual combat units, battalion, brigade, division level, coming in into Ukraine. If you're in a live firefight, so basically a war, or even a declared war, all these politicians in Europe get to shut their opposition down instantly.
Yeah.
Jail, execution, or the front. It's amazing how fast you can shut down all criticism. You got people like Schultz, Baerbock, 360. You've got people like Redick and the rest of these guys. Macron, Meloni. They're actually extremely weak leaders and pretty much spineless before their American masters. They're really good at beating their own people.
Yeah.
Whipping the peasants, but they don't particularly stand up for the interests of the peasants.
Gotcha. Well, then you know what? The way you paint that picture, it looks like maybe almost certainly they're going to try to double down.
Well, they are. Look, when Macron said, "Oh, let's send troops." Now, France has about 50,000 troops it can send. Some of them are already sitting on the Ukrainian border. Because Stalwart Defender 2024 is this gigantic exercise, which really is just an umbrella for a bunch of smaller exercises that NATO is carrying out up and down Europe, and particularly up and down the Russian border. Dragon 2024, which ended 2 days ago on the 14th, that had on the Polish-Ukrainian border. So you've got a concentration of about 90,000 NATO troops, 2.5 Polish divisions, 20,000 Brits, about 7,000 Germans, not quite sure how many Americans, because it's not been very well published, interestingly enough. Some of those are reservists that were brought in over from the U.S., heavy tank division, or a brigade of it. Plus, you got 82nd Airborne that's already in theater, and 6th Cav in theater. So you've got over 1,200 pieces of heavy equipment, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, wheeled fighting vehicles, and so on. All of that artillery, all of that's piled up on the Polish-Ukrainian border. If we go back and remember that about a month ago, the British were calling to send an expeditionary force into Ukraine. And they said, let's do it the 24th. That's the date they gave. Let's do it the 24th of March. Why the 24th of March? The 14th of March, Dragon 2024 ended. It started about the 22nd of February. It ended. So now you got 10 days, 9 days for rest, relaxation, reorganization. And the 10th day, the balloon goes up. So it's concentration troops, and that's not counting other troops in those areas, including the rest of the Polish army and so on. So what could be the results? The most aggressive results, I believe, would be a deployment of NATO troops up and down the Dnieper River in a belief that as soon as the Russian army sees NATO in front of it, it'll fall on its knees, the leadership will buckle, and they'll beg for anything but war with NATO, and then NATO, from a position of strength, can dictate terms to Russia.
Yeah.
And then you put the crack pipe down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reality kicks in. Usually with the first artillery barrages and air combat right over that area. So, yeah, now welcome to World War III, because Russia's not going to back off. Mm-hmm. It no longer particularly scares anyone. A less aggressive posture would be to try to block around Nikolaev any Russian movements toward Odessa, which results in the same thing on a smaller scale. But the problem is for the NATO troops in Romania, plus the 101st Airborne Division, that's most located in Romania, but has a brigade up in Moldova, keeping Maya Sandu in power. That's her Praetorian guard there, because the people despise her. Yeah. But the only way they can effectively move up to block Odessa is to take Pridnestrovia, Transnistria, which means a big fight, because Transnistria has about a 400,000 population, which about majority are Russian citizens, and out of those, about 120,000 men who are most of whom are veterans, plus gigantic depots of ammunition that nobody's going to let the NATO or Ukrainian troops grab. They'll get a Kinjal in there, and you'll have an earthquake and a boom heard in Rome. It's that big. So basically, there'd be in a fight right off the bat, just trying to keep their logistics up and running to block any Russian movements through Nikolaev and the land route to Odessa. The least aggressive posture, which I believe is probably what they'll start off with, is for NATO to roll into the northwestern Ukraine on the Belarus border and relieve the Ukrainian troops there, which would then filter out and be used in the next big attack that Zelensky is bragging about. He's going to have another offensive, counter offensive to Crimea, I guess across the Dnieper.
And would those troops then be sort of like sheep dipped as Ukrainian to not show that troops? No, they would.
There's about 100,000 Ukrainian troops on the Belarus border.
I see.
So those troops would be allowed to die for Zelensky, whereas now they're just sitting there because there's no action on the Belarus border, sitting there smoking and joking. Now they'll get to be heroes for Zelensky and his Anglo-Math.
That will happen because they sent the Kraken unit to its death trying to invade Russia proper, which I can't believe. I mean, it's just stunning, the bizarre decisions of their leadership to try to invade the Belgorodskaya Oblast with, like, infantry. They just got slaughtered.
Well, most of the troops that they sent in there were Russians, actually. There was Siberian Battalion, there was Free Russia, and all these battalions of Russian Nazis that have flown.
All got crushed near the start of the war, or they were able to sort of hide for a while.
Well, no, they were actually they did a couple incursions into Belgrade before in small groups. Groups. They were mostly husbanded to do just that because it's Russians freeing Russia and whatever. The Western PR needs it. They run with those stories. They did take quite a few casualties in Avdiivka because they got tossed in that area into that meat grinder because everything was getting tossed in that meat grinder because they didn't have enough forces to stop the collapse of Avdiivka. So they were tossing everything and everybody in there. When that failed, they got reorganized and pushed back up, and they were used to try to sabotage the elections. And yes, they took heavy casualties. They were taking 300 to 500 casualties a day for 2-3 days. There really aren't that many of them to begin with. And doubtfully a lot of them are how should I put it, being escorted to their future lawsuits for traitorism. In other words,
they were captured.
Yeah, I doubted a lot of them were captured. I doubted any of them were captured, if you get my point.
Oh, in that sense, gotcha. Sort of expedited justice. Yeah.
Very expedited. The 545 millimeter expedition.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it's been a failure. It's been a ringing failure. So, and on top of that, you've got other issues on the front. Russia's coalition mobile howitzer has come in. And the coalition mobile howitzer has a range of 80 plus kilometers. And that's without rocket assistant rounds. That's with regular gunpowder, cotton gunpowder rounds. Gun cotton rounds, which is your standard round, bags of gun cotton that's used to fire the rounds. And that's 80 kilometers right now. And then you've got the new missiles that are for the Hurricane system that basically almost doubles the range up to 100 kilometers. And that's why you got the HIMARS going kaboom. Because for the HIMARS to be effective, they are now within striking range, whereas earlier they were outside of striking range. And they were pretty mobile, so they could get away faster. Then you've got the problem with the Russian JDAMs. The Russian JDAMs have a range of 80 kilometers. So a fighter bomber like a Sukhoi could come up 20 kilometers from the border, launch. Well, it's not even launch. Drop a JDAM or FOB in Russian. The wings open up and the bomb glides in 60 kilometers behind the front and whacks something. Well, to get those fighters, they needed to pull in the Patriot systems closer to keep them in range. And the moment they pulled in the Patriot systems closer to pull them in range, two Patriot batteries went kaboom.
I see.
And a Patriot battery is a radar truck, a command truck, a generator truck, and up to 8 launcher trucks, each truck carrying 4 missiles, plus all the ash and trash that has to support those units up in the front. So, the supply trucks are carrying additional missiles, evacuation trucks, loading trucks, and so on, cranes to load the missiles in. You're not going to hand load those missiles.
Oh, yeah, I guess, yeah. I never thought about that, yeah.
If you're looking at a full battery for a Patriot, you're looking up to 90 people.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. So it's not a small battery for considering the missile system. So that all brings into problems. So what does NATO do? And that's the big question right now. Now, when they say everybody said no to Macron's idea, that's crap. Mm-hmm. That's absolute crap. First of all, when they say no, that doesn't mean no.
Yeah.
They said there were not going to be any artillery pieces. There aren't going to be any fighting vehicles. There aren't going to be any rocket artillery. There aren't going to be any helicopters. There aren't going to be any tanks. There aren't going to be any fighter planes. Yeah. Anyways, so that when they're saying there aren't going to be any boots on the ground, even though they are already, that absolutely means nothing. Second of all, even within French politics, for example, the former Prime Minister Pierre, can't remember his last name, he came out on French television right after the bat and said, yes, we have to go. So there's an actual very large war hawk contingent in French politics. And that the people are protesting, nobody gives a damn. Peasants don't matter. They only have to go die for their masters. Yeah. That's the only, and pay taxes and work. That's their only outlet in life. Feed the masters' will. Western democracy. In Germany, when Schulz is saying no, there's actually a very large pro-war faction that's pushing him down. If he gets replaced right now, the people are going to come in. It's not going to be alternative future for Germany, unfortunately. Yeah. It's not going to be Link, which is pretty spineless, all things be told. It's going to be war hawks that are going to come in there, minus any elections, really. And there you go. The British have been all for it, and they just kept mum, because they are all for it. The Czechs are now on board, the Poles are on board, and the pre-Baltics are on board. But you got to understand, and the Romanians, and the Moldovans, even though Moldova isn't part of NATO. Yeah. But you got to understand, once this starts rolling, you don't need all of NATO right off the bat. Once the French are sending units and the Czechs are sending units and they're getting whacked, and they will be getting whacked, it's going to pull behind it. The current behind it is going to start pulling in the rest of NATO. Mm-hmm. The rest of non-American NATO. Now, American units up front, they will probably also be involved to some degree or another. 82nd Airborne, 6th Cav, 101st Airborne, and possible other units. But America as a whole is probably going to stay further out of it and let Europe die.
Yeah, let them die for this. Yeah.
Europe is meat, and it's too stupid, unfortunately, to realize. The vast majority of Europeans are too stupid to realize they are meat, and they're going to go straight to the slaughter.
Now, this might be just from a Russian cultural standpoint. This might be one of my last few questions. I have to get going, unfortunately, today. But I hear a lot that since Ukrainians are essentially duped Russians, that really Ukraine is a fake entity, and that actually they're really just Russians under a different name or something. But in that sense, the average sort of Ukrainian grunt who may not be trained very well might have a lot more fighting spirit just from his heritage than the average Frenchman or Dutch infantryman or whatever. Do you believe that there's any truth to that? Or is that some sort of like Russian jingoism? Like, yeah, of course, we're the best fighters in the world. And that's, once the NATO guys come in, they'll just break after the first gunshots. They'll run away.
Well, there's a lot to that. And I'm not downgrading the Poles. Poles are Slavs, and Slavs have this very bad, most Slavs. I won't say all Slavs, because the Bulgarians never showed it as much. No. But Slavs overall have a very bad tendency of being assed up stubborn. Mm-hmm. It's the surrender just doesn't taste well on the tongue, so let's just keep fighting. Yeah. You've got Ukrainian soldiers when they're being told surrender, and they scream back, Russians don't surrender.
Gotcha.
It's mule stubborn, minus, unfortunately, in their case, enough brain power to figure out you're fighting against your own, who are not there to harm you and kill you.
Yeah.
So you've got lots of incidents like that. It's just stupid stubbornness. And the Poles got it too, to a smaller degree, but they've got it. So it's not going to be a cakewalk, but Europe's not going to be able to handle this fight. And it's not meant to handle a fight. That's the whole point. That's what these idiots, mass of Europeans, don't understand. First of all, Europeans, we Russians own a fourth of Europe. Geographically speaking, Europe goes to the Ural Mountains and the Northern Caucasus. We own more than a fourth of Europe.
Yeah.
So, yeah. When we say Europeans, we're not even talking Europeans. We're talking about EU, basically. They're not smart enough to figure out they're not supposed to win. They're supposed to die in place, be destroyed. And then America and the American elite are going to make a lot of money off of rebuilding you, because all the debts are going to go off the list. All of a sudden, you're going to get credits for a new Marshall Plan. And, the crazy thing, I've been reading about this since the late 1990s. It's not been a hidden thing. Articles in The Economist, considering that's a British rag, and in various American rags, that we need another good war, the good war. And when you're speaking Russian, there's no articles in Russian.
Yeah.
So you can't understand the good war. People won't understand it. Okay, good war. It's not good war. It's the good war. World War II was the good war, not because people were killing and destroying Hitler and his regime, but because that pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
That's why most people are saying it was the good war. And when these elites are saying we need another the good war part 2,
yeah,
that Europe. And some of those articles flat out, Europe will get to rebuild Europe, and we'll get to grow up on that.
Gotcha.
And a big competitor that way, the European Union. And these Europeans are too stupid to realize, just like a lot of Ukrainians are too stupid to realize, they're meat for the slaughter. Mm-hmm. The future is to die, and those that survive to live in poverty for their masters. And their masters aren't sitting in their capitals. That's a colonial elite. Their masters are sitting in London and D.C. London is questionable. So or New York City is more likely than Wall Street.
So, Stanislav, we are at the very beginning of spring of 2024 as I talk to you, okay? So what is happening in the war that is going to be happening right now, and what is going to happen this spring?
Well, we're already pretty deep in the spring. The Russian counteroffensive is continuing. We'll begin with that. Mm-hmm. This is that counteroffensive because once the Ukrainian offensive petered out, the counteroffensive began. It's continuing. It's going relatively slowly. By all means, this isn't the Soviet era, World War II, big tank divisional or higher level tank movements, but it's going. Mm-hmm. It's going a lot faster than it was going before. So we're earlier, pre-fall of Artyomovsk, or better yet, pre-fall of Avdiivka. You may have had movements of 5-10 meters a day. You're now having movements of an average of about 500 to 1,500 meters a day.
Oh, really?
Yes, significantly larger movements. The whole front, except for the Kherson area, is alive. So there's various movements. The Ukrainians have lost about a third of that little bridgehead they made in Rabotina that cost them 80,000, which, in all honesty, if it wasn't for a political sense, from a military sense, Rabotina should have been abandoned and that defensive line straightened out. There's nothing there to hold. But since the Ukrainians paid a small price, 80,000 dead, to take 120 square kilometers, so that the viewer understands, that's 10 kilometers wide, 12 kilometers deep. 120
things in square kilometers, they always sound much bigger than in linear, Yeah.
Right. It's a front that is a tiny frontage. It's a tiny little square. And it always looked great on those American and European maps because they blow it up. Look how big this is. They took Rabotina. Rabotina's a village of 3 streets. I mean, just to keep... They do have a post office. Well, they had a post office. There's really not much left of Rabotina, except for basements. And those are questionable these days. Unlike a good artillery strike, 152 millimeter right on top of a basement to end that basement.
Yeah.
So, it's in a low area. So, by any means, by any kind of military logic, that place should have been abandoned because it's a bulge that can't be held. It's an unholdable territory. It's just going to suck in more and more troops into their very timely end. But thankfully, the Ukrainians are anything but political animals. Mm-hmm. So, as political animals that need PR, constant PR, they left the troops in and they reinforced them somewhat. They did have to move out, I think it was a 65th mechanized brigade out of that area, which pretty much so meant collapse of the defensive area, and Rabotina is getting squeezed every day. And they hadn't moved that to Avdiivka, where they got whacked. And then steadily everything's being pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And that's the Ukrainian side. Now, we've got elections in Russia. Mm-hmm. So just so people understand, there are 700 plus registered parties. Parliament's made up of, at least the parliament at present is made up of 5 parties that met the minimum 3% bar for voting, popular vote.
Well, yeah, just so you understand, it's extremely easy to register a party in Russia. The problem is registering a party and promoting one are 2 different things entirely. But yes.
Oh, yeah, of course. There's a lot of those 700 parties. A lot of them are one platform party. For example, there are a bunch of monarchist parties, but all they offer is let's bring back the monarchy. There's no economic plan. There's no nothing. It's just one platform.
I believe, isn't there a party of like automobile enthusiasts? Where it's like the drivers of Russia party, and all they care about is stuff related to cars and nothing else. So
there's a party of pensioners, which is kind of like what's the American Retirees Alliance?
Oh gosh, I know what you're talking about. That
ARP.
Yeah,
right?
American Association of Retired Persons. ARP.
It's like ARP formed its own party. Well, great. What do you got to offer besides let's get better benefits for retirees?
Well,
You know, you got to kind of have a full spectrum platform before you can hope to get voters in on something.
Yeah.
That's kind of how real full-fledged political parties
What
work.
you have
So
to
there's
do is you have to be like that. Ironically, the newest party, which is called like the New People Party, is you have to get a bunch of rich people with business interests together. Because I think that's a little bit more of a single interest party. Because anytime you meet with them or talk to them, it's really just like business, money, make money, business.
Yeah.
But that can form a broader coalition of people of any sort of business stripe or creed or whatever.
Well, hell, even the communists, last presidential elections, the communists ran a multimillionaire as their candidate.
Well, yeah.
But he ran the kolkhoz or savkhoz Lenin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which savkhozes were factory commercial or factory farms. Well, kolkhoz was a farm where everybody lived, a cooperative farm. Well, government installed cooperative, collective farm. That's a better problem. Not cooperative. Collective farm where everybody lived on the farm. A savkhoz was a collective farm where everybody lived in an apartment building, which made it even worse. Because you didn't even get the limited freedom of living on the actual farmland. You're all living in in small Khrushchev apartment buildings, and then being bust out to work at the farm during the day.
Yeah.
So the savkhoz Lenin, which people kept pointing out because he's running, see, we've kept the traditions, it's a savkhoz. Yeah, it's savkhoz Lenin. So it's incorporated or limited savkhoz Lenin. That's just the name. It's not a savkhoz. There are no savkhozes.
Well, I think the main thing is just that he sort of, I wrote an article about that back at the time, and I think that the public, or the place I wrote it for vanished. So I'll tell you in short is that the one thing that Grudinin had sort of on his side, this man in question, was I think he created the sort of mini little like utopia there that a lot of Russians who are more, let's just say, on the lazy side would like, because it looks like this nice guy organized everything to be really pretty and clean, and everyone has a clean apartment, and they have a really nice daycare center. It kind of was like a little mini utopia from the perspective of a lot of people there. And you know, dude, in Russia and in America, the whole world, there's a large part of the voting population that wants those handouts. They want those government handouts, baby.
I don't consider that lazy or government handouts. I consider that actually corporations should have to invest back into the society that they're working in. And if you look at it, that's how things always ran until modern finance came in. And I'm talking about pre-communist times. You look at what are called in America robber barons, or you look at the kupets mercantile class in Russia under the empire. These people gave back. They built schools. They built universities. They built libraries. Even Lenin's Biblioteca имени Ленина.
Yeah, the library. Yeah.
The library named after Lenin was never built by the communists. It was built by a Russian merchant who built it and donated it to the city of Moscow, his home city. So the rich giving back to society was always a normal standard procedure. And it was a procedure that's written in Christianity.
Yeah.
Because they all said, we all sinned, so we've got to give something back, and we've got to show something for it. That we've got enough for ourselves, we've got to give back to society.
Yeah,
that all went away.
Stanislav, not to cut you off, but what I was trying to say, because I think it's important for the audience to understand, is that the people looking at Grudinin, they didn't see this as being like, hey, that's Savkhoz imeni Lenina. I can go to that place, and if you work hard, you get a nice apartment and you get a nice school. They don't. What I mean is, they didn't really see it as a trade. When I talk to a lot of average people in Russia, they just want to get stuff from the government. Just give me everything. Whoever gives me stuff, that's who I want. So that's why I mentioned handouts. What you're talking about is something very, very, very different, and it's an approach that I agree with. So I just want to say we agree on that issue. Anyways.
Well, a lot of corporations, a lot of businesses, especially in the old days, they also provided apartment housing for their workers. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, if you look at what those apartments in places like New York were, where they used industrial slavery, the North had slavery out the yin-yang. You just didn't call it slavery. You called it debt servitude. You got immigrants coming into New York City. They don't have anything. They get a job at a factory. So the factory gives them an apartment, which is just a one-room hovel with no windows. and God forbid you get a disease going in there.
And disease did happen in New York due to the way the apartments were built. That's where some of the very first, what are they called, like zoning restrictions and how you would build apartments in New York. The first restrictions were related to like plagues and stuff.
Yep. Then you get a uniform from the job, the employer, and you're already in debt, and you don't get paid in dollars. You would get paid in credits. Credits you can only spend at the company store, where prices are elevated heavily. So you're always, every month, just going further and further in debt to your boss. You can leave anytime you want, just pay off the debt. And since nobody could pay off the debt, they're effectively slaves until they have or injury, and then they get kicked out of their apartment and they're destitute on the street with their families.
Well,
so the North had plenty.
The whole thing about like giving employees a place to live is that has to come with the thing where eventually you it's sort of like you work to pay it off and then it's yours. It can't be this weird thing where we control your life while you're here and then we don't need you. Goodbye. Yeah, it can't be like that.
Right. So yeah, so northern. So when I love that when the northern states and the people from the north. I know you're from the north. Oh, yeah. They criticize the South about slavery and all that. Excuse me, gentlemen, but the form of slavery used in the North was even much worse than whatever was used in more agrarian settings.
Yeah.
It's slavery, it's still slavery, but I mean, it's still that. Though companies, well, with Grudinin also had other problems, like his 11 or 12 secret bank accounts outside of Russia. Russian candidates. Yeah,
because Grudinin essentially, with this big presidential run he made, he really kind of put the spotlight on himself and exposed a lot of bad stuff he was involved with and destroyed his own life.
Oh, yeah. Well, the point with that was the communists actually took him as their candidate, which, think about it, good Lord. I've never been a communist. I'm not pro-communist. I have my own opinions on what should have been done with the Communist Party after. But the simple fact, this is how they ran. I mean, you're running a oligarch as your candidate. If you're not self-aware enough to figure out that's a bad idea, you've got issues. And B, I love their slogan, the government must listen to the people. Gentlemen, you were in power for 70 years. When the hell did you listen to the people?
Oh, yeah. There wasn't a lot of that back in the old days. No.
Yeah. Well, there's not a lot of that anywhere in most governments, including the great democracies of the West. Yeah. It's famous when Macron came out during Lukashenko's the demonstrations, a color revolution attempt to overthrow Lukashenko, and said the government has to listen to the people to keep its authenticity. Macron that set new Guinness Book World Records every year on how much CS gas he was dumping on his own people. Every single year. If you ever look at how many people have died from rubber bullets, which aren't rubber, that's a misdemeanor. A rubber bullet is a steel bullet that's coated in a thick layer of plastic. It's not rubber. At 4 or 5 meters, it'll probably just break your ribs or break an arm bone if it hits you. At a meter or so, it'll go right through the skull. There were plenty of pictures of people without fingers, with hands shot through, big holes in them, and so on. So which leads to the next issue. When Macron is getting ready to start World War III on a larger scale, out and out NATO troops in Russia, as not in small groups like they are now, but in actual battalion plus level units, and the people are protesting. Okay, and Western democracies really don't give a damn what the peasants want. No. Peasant needs to get his ass kicked and put in his place and know what he's supposed to do. Die, bleed.
You mentioned France is the perfect example because the whole Yellow Vest protests have been going on for 3 or 4 years now. I don't remember when they quite exactly started, but it's been years and years and years of the same protesting throughout France. In Germany, this is a little bit newer, but I mean, what you're right is that generally, the people don't get listened to. The masses kind of remain somewhat silent. I would say, if anything, ironically, in Russia, I think the leadership here pays more attention to opinion polls than in any Western country. So, not that they let that completely determine where things are going, but they certainly listen to it. But anyways, I think we need to get a little bit here back to... Well, what's this? Wait, what?
Organization.
Oh yeah, the People's Front. Yeah.
People's Front, which was set up by the government. Well, not directly by the government. It's got government funding. It was initiated by the government. But the reason for this is to make a direct, well, almost direct route between people's issues and the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
The local bureaucracies, the local small governments, the further you get away from the flag staff, the more freedom you have to do what you want to do. Yeah. And when you're in some of these small towns, that you know that nobody's ever going to come, inspector's ever going to come, or if he's going to come, we'll just buy him off once in a year or to 5 years. We'll do pretty much whatever the hell we want and screw the people. Yeah. And this circumvents all those small localized bureaucracies in a giant country and gets a voice up to that can be heard up by the government. By the federal level.
In fact, probably the best thing, and one of the reasons why I support the People's Front, is they have this program where, they'll do like a live stream, and the people basically call in, and the people who call in get advice about how to file complaints about the government. Because a lot of this thing, Stanislav, in Russia is, you actually have a lot of power to sort of rat out the government, to hire people in the government and have them sort of come down and smash them. But the thing is, you have to do that in the proper legal way, in the proper format, and it's really good that they have that program, because they've when I'm sitting there, I've been on the show a lot, and when I'm sitting there listening, I hear all these different problems, and they really actually help people get help, because it's sort of this, like you say, the farther away from the flagpole that they are, the worse things get. So you have to kind of get that flagpole to project its bright light onto some of these local bureaucrats to scare them into action. So,
yeah, I've been on the show quite. I'm usually on that show once a week, once every 2 weeks, and part of it, and they'll even add to this, to what you're saying. Not only will they get a person who's calling in, and they get a specialist on the line with that person, but they also oftentimes they will call directly to whoever the mayor of that town is, or one of his deputy mayors, and they'll pull him on the line. Yeah. So now on federal television, welcome. This is the local hero. Yeah. In quotes, air quotes. What the hell are you doing, and why haven't you done anything about it? And they're either trying to and they'll get smacked. This has to be done. We'll have another call in 2 weeks or in a month. We'll see how things have gone. And I've seen calls where nothing was done. Okay, so now we're going to go, and then I'll tell you, now the point is we'll bring this up to the Prosecutor General's office.
Oh, yeah.
And I usually get the local bureaucrats are so tight that a flea couldn't get through it. Yeah. And that shines a light on a lot of cockroaches that then start running around, that feed off the government till and don't do jack for the people or the government. So basically, either scoundrels or traitors. I don't know how else to put it. In a time of war, that's traitors. Yeah. It's no longer just a scoundrel. It's no longer a thief. It's an out-and-out traitorism.
And it's when you problem, like one comedian said a few years ago, the dirtiest word in the Russian language is local authorities. Well, Stanislav, on that very dark note, I guess we'll end things here. Is there any way that people can get a hold of you? Are you promoting anything? Any Telegram channels, YouTube channels, anything of the like? How can people find you if they want more of your wisdom and truly, really refreshing insights?
I don't know about the wisdom part. I don't want to consider myself too wise. Many more people, much more wiser. Many more people than myself.
You know what? You made some points today that I haven't heard from anyone else, so that's why I said that. I've definitely got a lot of food for thought after our discussion today. So,
on the Russian side, I have a Telegram channel, Stas Tuda и Обратно. On the English side, I have a Telegram channel that I don't spend enough time on. It's called Stas Was There.
Okay. All right. Very good. Stanislav Krapivnik, a former U.S. Army officer. Take care, friends, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, hit that button.